My name is David Levi, and for 43 years, I have carried a secret that has eaten away at my soul like a cancer. I am 71 years old now, living in a small apartment in the Jewish quarter of Rome, and I know my time on this earth is running short. The doctors have given me 6 months, maybe less. So before I stand before the Almighty and give an account of my life, I need to tell someone what happened that day in Jerusalem, what I heard, what I saw, and why I can never ever touch a shofar again. I was born here in Rome in 1954, in the shadow of the great synagogue on the Tiber. My father, Moshe Levi, was a cantor, a man whose voice could make stones weep. My mother, Sarah, was a quiet woman who prayed 3 times a day and never missed Shabbat. We were not wealthy, but we were rich in faith. Our home smelled of challah on Fridays and my mother's tears on Yom Kippur. When I was 7 years old, my father placed a small ram's horn in my hands. "David," he said, his eyes wet with pride, "this is not just an instrument. This is the voice of our people crying out to Hashem. One day you will blow the shofar, and the gates of heaven will open." I didn't understand what he meant then. I was just a boy who wanted to play football in the streets with my friends. But my father insisted. Every morning before school I practiced. The neighbors complained about the noise. My mother worried I would damage my lungs. But my father never wavered. "You have a gift, David. I have seen it in my dreams. You will blow the shofar in the Holy Land." By the time I was 19, I was the best shofar blower in Rome. My sound was pure, strong, unwavering. The chief rabbi himself asked me to blow during the high holy days. People said my tekiah could reach the throne of God. I was proud. Too proud, maybe. In 1975, when I was 21, my father told me something that changed everything. We were sitting in our small kitchen, the evening light filtering through the curtains. He looked older than his years, his hands trembling slightly as he poured tea. "David," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something I have never told anyone. When you were born, I had a vision. I saw you standing in the temple in Jerusalem, blowing the shofar before the Holy of Holies. But in the vision, something went wrong. The sound you made, it was not the sound of a ram's horn. It was something else. Something that made the angels themselves cover their ears." I laughed nervously. "Papa, you're scaring me. There is no temple in Jerusalem. It was destroyed 2,000 years ago." He gripped my wrist, his fingers like iron. "Listen to me. I don't know when or how, but you will blow the shofar in a holy place in Jerusalem. And when you do, you must be careful. You must have a pure heart. Because if you don't—" He stopped, his eyes distant. "If you don't, you will open a door that should never be opened." I didn't believe him. I thought he was getting old, superstitious, but his words stayed with me like a shadow. 2 years later, in 1977, I received a letter that would seal my fate. It was from the chief rabbinate of Israel. They were organizing a special ceremony at the Western Wall in Jerusalem for Yom Kippur. They had heard of my skill with the shofar and wanted me to come. All expenses paid. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. My mother begged me not to go. "Please, David, stay here with us. I have a bad feeling about this." But I was young, ambitious, hungry for recognition. I wanted to prove myself on the world stage. I wanted to blow the shofar where our fathers had blown it 3,000 years ago. I ignored my mother's tears and my father's warnings. I boarded a plane to Tel Aviv on September 10, 1977. I remember looking out the window as we descended, seeing the ancient hills of Judea below, golden in the afternoon sun. I felt a strange tightness in my chest, as if the land itself was holding its breath. When I arrived in Jerusalem, the city felt different than I had imagined. It wasn't just old. It was alive. The stones seemed to pulse with memory. Every corner whispered with the voices of prophets and kings. I stayed in a small hotel near the old city, and every night I practiced my shofar on the roof, looking out at the dome of the rock glowing in the moonlight. The day before Yom Kippur, I was taken to meet the high priest. Now, let me be clear. There is no temple, no official high priest in our time. But there are men, descendants of Aaron, who carry the title in secret, who prepare for the day when the temple will be rebuilt. This man, Rabbi Yitzchak Kadosh, was one of them. He was in his 70s, with a long white beard and eyes that seemed to see through you. We met in a small room beneath the Western Wall, in tunnels that tourists never see. The walls were ancient, Herodian stone, and the air smelled of earth and history. "David Levi," he said in Hebrew, his voice soft but commanding. I have heard much about you. Your father was right to train you. Tomorrow you will blow the shofar at the wall during Ne'ilah, the closing prayer of Yom Kippur. It is a great honor. Thank you, Rabbi, I said, bowing my head. I will do my best. He studied me for a long moment, then leaned forward. Tell me, David, are you pure of heart? The question caught me off guard. I try to be, Rabbi. Trying is not enough, he said sharply. When you blow the shofar tomorrow, you will be standing on ground where prophets walked, where the divine presence once dwelled. The sound you make will not just echo in the air, it will echo in the heavens. You must be completely pure. No secret sins, no hidden pride. Do you understand? I nodded, but inside I felt a creeping unease. I thought of the girls I had kissed in Rome, the lies I had told my parents, the envy I felt toward other musicians. Was I pure? Could anyone truly be pure? Good, Rabbi Kadosh said, standing. Go. Fast. Pray. Purify yourself. And tomorrow, blow with all your soul. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, my father's words echoing in my mind. You will open a door that should never be opened. I got up and went to the window. The old city stretched before me, the western wall visible in the distance, floodlit against the darkness. And for just a moment, I thought I saw something moving in the shadows near the wall. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, watching me. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was my imagination, nerves, exhaustion. But deep down, I knew something was waiting for me at the wall, something that had been waiting for a very, very long time. The morning of Yom Kippur, 1977, I woke before dawn. My body felt heavy, as if I hadn't slept at all, though I had finally drifted off around 3 in the morning. My mouth was dry from fasting, and my hands trembled slightly as I washed them according to tradition. I put on my white kittel, the traditional white robe worn on the holiest day of the year, and wrapped myself in my talit. In the mirror, I looked like a ghost. The shofar sat on the table beside my bed, its curved horn gleaming dully in the early light. I picked it up and held it to my lips, preparing to practice one quick blast, but something stopped me. A voice inside my head, or maybe it was my father's voice, I couldn't tell, said clearly, "Not yet, not here." I lowered the shofar and placed it carefully in its velvet bag. By the time I arrived at the Western Wall Plaza, thousands of people had already gathered. Men in black hats and long coats, women behind the mechitza, tourists with cameras, soldiers with rifles. The air was thick with prayer and anticipation. Yom Kippur is the day when the gates of heaven are said to be open, when God decides who will live and who will die in the coming year. Everyone was desperate to get their prayers through. Rabbi Kadosh found me in the crowd. He looked even more severe than the day before, his face gaunt from fasting, his eyes burning with intensity. "David," he said, gripping my shoulder. "Are you ready?" "I am, Rabbi." He studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt, maybe, or fear. But then he nodded curtly. "Good. You will blow during Ne'ilah, just before the final shofar blast that closes the gates. It is the most sacred moment of the day. Do not fail us." "I won't, Rabbi." He started to turn away, then stopped. "David, if you feel anything strange when you blow, anything at all, you stop immediately. Do you understand? You stop." "What do you mean, Rabbi? What could happen?" But he was already walking away, disappearing into the sea of white-clad worshippers. The day passed in a blur of prayer. Kol Nidra the night before had been emotional, but the day itself was something else. The heat was unbearable. People swayed and wept. Some fainted from fasting. The prayers seemed endless, confession after confession, beating our chests, begging for forgiveness. I tried to focus, to purify my heart as Rabbi Kadosh had instructed, but my mind kept drifting. I kept thinking about my father's warning. I kept seeing that shadow near the wall. Finally, as the sun began to set, turning the Jerusalem sky pink and gold, Ne'ilah began. The closing prayer. The final hour. The gates of heaven hanging open by a thread, about to slam shut. The crowd pressed forward, desperate, fervent. Men wept openly. Women wailed behind the barrier. The cantor's voice rose and fell like waves, crying out to God for mercy, for life, for one more year. And then Rabbi Kadosh appeared beside me. "Now, David, it's time." My legs felt weak as I stood. He led me to a small raised platform near the wall itself, close enough that I could touch the ancient stones. I could see the cracks between them, stuffed with thousands of tiny prayers written on scraps of paper. I could smell the stone, cold and eternal. I removed the shofar from its bag. My hands were shaking. One blast, Rabbi Kadosh said quietly. A tekiah gadola, a great blast. Let it be your soul crying out to heaven. Let it be pure. I nodded. I lifted the shofar to my lips. I closed my eyes. And I blew. For the first second, the sound was normal. The deep, mournful cry of the ram's horn. The sound I had made 10,000 times in my life. The sound of longing, of repentance, of hope. But then something changed. The note bent. Shifted. It was subtle at first, like a radio tuning between frequencies. But then it became something else entirely. The sound grew higher, thinner, piercing. It was no longer the sound of an animal horn. It was more like metal scraping against metal, or glass breaking in slow motion, or, and this is the only way I can describe it, like a door opening in the air itself. I tried to stop. God knows I tried, but I couldn't. My lips were frozen against the horn. My breath kept coming, even though I wasn't choosing to breathe. The sound poured out of me like water from a broken dam. People began to notice. The prayers faltered, heads turned. I could hear gasps, murmurs of confusion. And then the wall began to shake. I'm not talking about an earthquake. The ground wasn't moving. But the stones themselves, those massive ancient blocks that have stood for 2,000 years, they were vibrating, trembling. The papers stuffed in the cracks began to flutter and fall like snow. Rabbi Kadosh was beside me in an instant, his face white with terror. "Stop!" he shouted, grabbing my shoulder. "David, stop now!" But I couldn't stop. The sound kept coming, impossibly loud now, so loud that people were covering their ears, backing away. Some of the Levites near the front fell to their knees, their faces twisted in fear or pain or ecstasy. I couldn't tell which. And then I saw it. Between the stones of the wall, in the cracks and crevices, something was moving. At first I thought it was just shadows, tricks of the setting sun. But no, there was something there. Something dark and fluid, like oil, seeping through the gaps in the stones. It moved with purpose, flowing down the wall, pooling on the ground. And it had eyes, hundreds of them, thousands. Small, black, gleaming eyes, all turning to look at me. The sound from the shofar changed again, becoming a shriek, a wail, something that made my teeth ache and my skull feel like it was splitting open. I could taste blood in my mouth. Could feel something pushing against the inside of my chest, trying to get out. Rabbi Kadosh was screaming now, along with dozens of others. "In the name of the Almighty, stop, close the door, close it." And then, somehow, the shofar was ripped from my lips. I don't know if Rabbi Kadosh tore it away or if it fell on its own, but suddenly it was gone, clattering on the stone plaza, and the sound stopped. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Thousands of people stood frozen, staring at the wall. The dark liquid, or whatever it was, had stopped moving. It hung there on the stones, glistening, waiting. And then, slowly, it began to recede, flowing backward, up the wall, disappearing into the cracks. Within seconds, it was gone. The papers that had fallen began to settle. The wall stood as it always had, ancient and impassive. But everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard that sound. Rabbi Kadosh was on his knees beside me, his lips moving in silent prayer, tears streaming down his face. Other rabbis rushed forward, forming a circle around us, chanting psalms of protection. People in the crowd were crying, fainting, fleeing. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking so violently I could barely control them. There was blood dripping from my nose, my ears, my vision was blurred. "What did I do?" I whispered. "Rabbi, what did I do?" He looked at me and I will never forget the expression on his face. It wasn't anger, it wasn't even fear, it was pity. "You opened it," he said, hoarsely. "Just a crack, just for a moment. But you opened it." "Opened what?" He closed his eyes. "The door your father warned you about. The door between here and the other side, where the things that were cast out dwell, where the demons wait." I felt my stomach drop. "But it's closed now, isn't it? It went back. It's over." Rabbi Kadosh shook his head slowly. "It closed, yes, but now it knows the way. Now it knows there is a crack it can slip through. And it knows your voice." Someone threw a blanket over my shoulders. Hands guided me away from the wall, through the crowd, into a waiting car. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I was taken to a hospital, examined, declared physically fine despite the blood, but I wasn't fine. I could feel it inside me like a splinter in my soul. The memory of that sound, the weight of those eyes. Late that night, Rabbi Kadosh came to see me. He sat on the edge of my hospital bed, looking older than ever. "David," he said gently, "you must leave Jerusalem. Tonight, go back to Rome. Never touch a shofar again. Never even think about blowing one. Do you understand?" "But Rabbi, I didn't mean to." "I know," he said, placing a hand on my head like a father blessing a child. "I know you didn't. But intentions don't matter now. You have a mark on you. A connection. If you blow the shofar again, anywhere, anytime, you will open that door again. And next time, we might not be able to close it." I left Jerusalem the next morning. On the first flight out. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't even go back to my hotel for my things. I never told my father what happened. He died 2 years later, and I let him believe I had fulfilled his dream, that I had blown the shofar in the Holy Land, and it was beautiful. But my mother knew. Mothers always know. She took one look at my face when I returned and said, "Oh, David, what did you hear?" I couldn't answer her. I haven't touched a shofar in 43 years. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it, that sound, that impossible, unworldly sound. And I wonder if the door ever truly closed at all. The first few years after Jerusalem were the hardest. I couldn't escape what had happened, even though I was thousands of miles away in Rome. Every Rosh Hashanah, when the shofar was blown in synagogue, I had to leave. The sound, even the normal earthly sound, made my entire body seize up. My heart would race. My hands would shake. I would taste blood in my mouth, even though there was no wound. People noticed, of course. In the Jewish quarter of Rome, everyone knows everyone. They whispered about me. "David Levi, the great shofar blower, can't even sit through services anymore." Some thought I had lost my faith. Others thought I had gone mad. My mother told them I had a medical condition, something with my ears. It was a lie, but a merciful one. I tried to live a normal life. I got a job working in my uncle's print shop near Campo de Fiori. I learned to set type, to operate the heavy presses, to lose myself in the mechanical rhythm of ink and paper. I even met a girl, Rebecca, a sweet-faced daughter of a rabbi from Livorno. We courted for 6 months. She was kind, patient with my silences and my nightmares. We talked about marriage, but I couldn't tell her what had happened. And I knew, deep down, that whatever had touched me in Jerusalem had left a stain. I was marked, contaminated somehow. How could I bring that into a marriage? How could I risk passing it on to children? I broke off the engagement in 1980. Rebecca cried and asked me why, begged me to explain. I told her I wasn't ready. The truth, that I was afraid something dark would follow me into her life, I kept locked inside. For years I thought maybe Rabbi Kadosh had been wrong. Maybe it was just trauma, just psychological. Maybe if I waited long enough, the memory would fade, and I could be normal again. Then came 1985. I was 31 years old, working late at the print shop one October evening. It was just after Yom Kippur, 8 years since that day at the wall. The city was quiet, and I was alone, finishing a large order of wedding invitations. The press was running, the familiar clank and hiss filling the air. And then I heard it. At first I thought it was just the press making a strange noise, a belt slipping or a gear grinding. But then I realized it was that sound. Not exactly the same, but close enough. That high metallic shriek, that sense of something bending the air itself. I froze. The press kept running, but I couldn't move. My eyes darted around the shop, looking for the source. And then I saw it. In the corner near the back door there was a shadow. Not a normal shadow, this one was too dark, too thick, like a hole cut in reality. And it was moving. Slowly, deliberately, it began to spread across the wall, reaching toward me. I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps. The sound grew louder, more insistent, and then, from within the shadow, I saw them again. The eyes. Hundreds of them. Just like at the wall. Watching. Waiting. My hand found a canister of turpentine on the workbench. Without thinking, I threw it at the shadow. The canister passed through as if through smoke, shattering against the wall. But the shadow recoiled, it pulled back, contracting, and then, suddenly, it was gone. The sound stopped. The shop was quiet again except for the press, still chugging away, indifferent to what had just happened. I stood there trembling for what felt like hours. Then I grabbed my coat and ran out into the night. I didn't go home. I went straight to the great synagogue and banged on the door until the night watchman let me in. I demanded to see Rabbi Colombo, the chief rabbi of Rome. He was an old man, even then, but sharp-minded and deeply learned. He listened to my story without interruption, his face growing more grave with every word. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. "David," he said, "finally, what you experienced in Jerusalem, it is not unprecedented. There are stories, very old stories, about shofar blowers who opened gateways, usually by accident, usually because of some impurity in their hearts or minds. But Rabbi, it's been 8 years. Why would it come back now?" He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Because time is different for them. For the shedim, the demons. 8 years. 80 years. It's nothing. They are patient. And once they have marked someone, they do not forget." "What do I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "How do I make it stop?" Rabbi Colombo sighed deeply. "I don't know if you can make it stop entirely, but you can protect yourself. Prayer, obviously. Study. Keep yourself surrounded by holiness. Never be alone in dark places. Never let your guard down." He paused, then added quietly, "And David, if you ever feel the urge to blow a shofar again, no matter how small, no matter what the reason, resist it. With every fiber of your being, resist it. Because if you open that door a second time, I don't think anyone will be able to close it." I followed his advice. I became scrupulously observant. I prayed 3 times a day. I studied Talmud every night. I wore a red string around my wrist, kept psalms in my pocket, avoided cemeteries and abandoned places. And for many years, it worked. The shadow didn't return. The sound faded from my nightmares. I began to think maybe I was safe. I even started a family. In 1990, I met Anna, a woman who wasn't Jewish but who had a good heart and a strong spirit. We married quietly. My mother didn't approve of the mixed marriage, but she came to accept it eventually. We had 2 children, a daughter named Sophia and a son named Marco. I never told Anna the full story, but she knew I carried something heavy. She never pushed me to explain. I was happy, in a cautious way. I worked, I provided, I loved my children. I watched them grow. Sophia became a doctor. Marco became a teacher. I walked them both down the aisle at their weddings. I became a grandfather. And all the while I felt it watching, waiting. I would catch glimpses sometimes. A shadow in the corner of my eye. A sound just at the edge of hearing. But it never came close again. It was as if it was testing me, seeing if I would make a mistake, if I would lower my defenses. I never did. But last year everything changed. It was Yom Kippur again, 2024. I was 70 years old. I had long since retired from the print shop. I spent my days reading, walking, visiting my grandchildren. I no longer attended synagogue regularly. The sound of the shofar was still too much for me. But I watched services on television sometimes. That day I was home alone. Anna had passed away 3 years before, and my children were with their own families. I was fasting, saying prayers quietly in my apartment, when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find a young man, maybe 25, with dark curly hair and intense eyes. He wore a black suit and a kippah. "David Levi?" he asked in Hebrew. My blood ran cold. "Who are you?" "My name is Yonatan Kadosh," he said. "My grandfather was Rabbi Yitzchak Kadosh. He died last month. Before he passed, he told me to find you. He said you would understand why." I let him in, my hands shaking. We sat in my small living room, and Yonatan pulled out an old leather journal from his bag. "My grandfather kept notes," he said, "about that day in 1977. About what happened at the wall. He documented everything. Your name, the sound you made, what he saw. He spent the rest of his life researching it, trying to understand it. He opened the journal and showed me pages filled with cramped Hebrew script, diagrams, references to obscure mystical texts. He believed," Yonatan continued, "that what happened that day was a partial manifestation of what the Kabbalists call the Sitra Achra, the other side, the realm of impurity and evil. And he believed that because you were the one who opened the door, even briefly, you are the only one who can close it permanently." "Close it?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Rabbi Kadosh told me never to blow the shofar again. He said if I did, it would open fully." He was right, Yonatan said. If you blow it carelessly, randomly, it will open. But my grandfather discovered something in his research. If you blow it intentionally, with the right kavana, the right intention, in the right place, at the right time, you can seal the door forever. And if I fail? Yonatan's eyes were sad. Then the door opens completely, and everything on the other side comes through. I stared at him. Why would I risk that? Why wouldn't I just live out my remaining years in peace? He closed the journal gently. Because it's not just about you anymore, Mr. Levi. My grandfather documented 11 other incidents since 1977. Small ones, shadows appearing, strange sounds, people disappearing. The crack you opened, it's widening. Slowly but steadily. In another 10 years, maybe 20, it won't matter if you blow the shofar or not. It will open on its own. I felt the room spinning. What are you asking me to do? Come back to Jerusalem, Yonatan said. This Yom Kippur, blow the shofar at the wall one more time. But this time, do it right. Close the door. Save us all. I wanted to say no. Every fiber of my being screamed no. I was an old man, tired, sick. I had paid my dues. I had suffered enough. But then I thought of Sophia, of Marco, of my 4 grandchildren. I thought of the world they would inherit if I did nothing. I need to think about it, I told Yonatan. He nodded and stood to leave. At the door he turned back. Mr. Levi, my grandfather's last words were about you. He said, tell David I'm sorry. Tell him I should have stopped him before he blew. Tell him it wasn't his fault. After he left, I sat in the darkness for hours. The next morning I called my doctor and asked how much time I really had. He was honest with me. 6 months, maybe less. The cancer was spreading faster than expected. I called Yonatan that afternoon. I'll do it, I said. Book the flight. I arrived in Jerusalem on September 20th, 2024, exactly 47 years after my first visit. The city had changed in some ways. Taller buildings, more traffic, security checkpoints everywhere. But the old city, the wall, they were eternal, unchanged, waiting. Yonatan met me at the airport. He had arranged everything, a place, for me to stay, meetings with rabbis who understood what we were trying to do, even a special shofar, one that had been ritually purified and prepared specifically for this moment. This isn't just any ram's horn, Yonatan explained as we drove through the streets of Jerusalem. It comes from a sheep that was raised in the hills of Hebron, never touched by impurity. It was slaughtered according to the strictest kosher laws. Rabbis have prayed over it for weeks. I held the shofar in my lap, feeling its weight. It was smooth, perfectly curved, beautiful. And I was terrified of it. The days leading up to Yom Kippur were spent in intense preparation. I met with a council of rabbis, all experts in Kabbalah and mysticism. They taught me specific prayers, specific meditations, specific intentions I would need to hold in my mind when I blew. You must understand, said Rabbi Weiss, a wizened old Kabbalist from Safed. That sound is not just vibration. Sound is creation. When Hashem created the world, he did so with words, with sound. And when you blow the shofar, you are not just making noise. You are speaking in the language of creation itself. But I spoke that language before, I said. And I opened a door to hell. Because you were not pure, Rabbi Weiss said gently. Not completely. You had pride, ambition, hidden sins. They created a dissonance in the sound. And dissonance creates cracks. This time you must be completely pure. Your heart, your mind, your intention, all must be aligned with the divine will. I'm a 70-year-old man with cancer, I said bitterly. I'm dying. How can I be pure? The fact that you are dying, Rabbi Weiss said, is exactly what makes you pure. You have nothing left to prove, nothing to gain. You are simply a soul preparing to return to its source. That is the purest state a human can achieve. I spent hours each day in prayer and meditation. I fasted. I immersed in the mikvah. I studied the book of Psalms until my eyes burned. Yonatan stayed with me, supporting me, never letting me lose focus. But late at night, when I was alone in my small room near the old city, I would feel it watching. The shadow, the presence. It knew I was here. It knew what I was planning. And it was waiting to see if I would fail. On the eve of Yom Kippur, Rabbi Weiss came to see me one last time. Tomorrow, he said, when you blow the shofar, there will be a moment, just a split second, when you will feel everything. The weight of the world, the presence of God, the hunger of the demons. In that moment, you must choose. Will you call out to heaven, or will you listen to the whispers from below? How will I know which is which? I asked. You'll know, he said simply. Trust your soul, David. It knows the way home. The next day, Yom Kippur 2024, I woke before dawn. My body was weak. The cancer had been gnawing at me for months, and the fasting was taking its toll. But my mind was clear, focused. For the first time in 47 years, I felt at peace. Jonathan helped me dress in my white kittel and talit. We walked together through the old city to the Western Wall Plaza. It was still early, not yet crowded, but already people were gathering for the long day of prayer ahead. The wall looked exactly as I remembered it. The same massive stones, the same cracks stuffed with prayers, the same sense of weight, of history, of the divine presence hovering just beyond reach. Rabbi Weiss and several other rabbis were waiting for us. They formed a circle around me, creating a protective barrier. They began chanting psalms quietly, filling the air with words of protection and holiness. You will blow during Ne'ilah, Rabbi Weiss told me, just as you did before. But this time, when you blow, you must imagine yourself as a channel, not the source of the sound, but a vessel through which divine light can flow. Let go of ego. Let go of fear. Just be empty, and let God fill you. I nodded, unable to speak. The day passed in a blur. I stood near the wall, praying with thousands of others, feeling the collective desperation, the collective hope. My legs ached. My stomach cramped from hunger, but I stayed focused. As the sun began to set, painting the sky above Jerusalem in shades of gold and crimson, Ne'ilah began. The gates of heaven were closing. This was the final moment, the last chance to slip through before the judgment was sealed. The cantor's voice rose in the ancient melody, pleading with God for mercy. The crowd pressed forward, thousands of voices joining in prayer. I could feel the intensity building like a wave gathering force, and then Rabbi Weiss appeared beside me. Now, David, it's time. I stood on shaking legs. Jonathan handed me the shofar. It felt impossibly heavy in my hands. I walked to the wall. I placed my left hand on the ancient stone, feeling its cold, eternal surface against my palm. I could feel the prayers of millions soaked into these rocks. I could feel the presence of the temple that once stood here, the echoes of sacrifices, the memory of the Holy of Holies. I lifted the shofar to my lips. I closed my eyes, and I began to blow. The first note came out pure, clear, the sound of a ram's horn, nothing more. For a moment I thought maybe this would be easy. Maybe I had worried for nothing. But then, just as before, the sound began to change. It shifted, bent, became something other. That high metallic tone, that sense of reality tearing at the edges. I felt panic rising in my chest. It was happening again. I was failing. I was going to open the door. But then I remembered Rabbi Weiss's words. Let go of ego. Let go of fear. Just be empty. I stopped fighting. I stopped trying to control the sound. Instead, I let myself become nothing. Just a hollow channel, a reed through which something greater could flow. And in that moment of surrender, everything changed. The sound didn't stop being strange. It was still that impossible, otherworldly tone. But now I could hear something beneath it. A melody. Ancient. Beautiful. Heartbreaking. It was the sound of creation itself, the sound God made when He spoke light into darkness. It was the sound of every prayer ever prayed, every tear ever shed, every hope ever hoped. And beneath that I could hear them. The things on the other side. They were screaming, not in triumph, but in fury, in fear, because they knew what was happening. The door wasn't opening, it was closing. I felt the shofar grow hot in my hands, almost too hot to hold. Light began to pour from the cracks in the wall. Not normal light, but something brighter, purer, impossible to look at directly. The shadows that had gathered in the corners of the plaza began to retreat, shrinking back, trying to flee. But there was nowhere for them to go. The sound reached a crescendo, and I felt something inside me break. Not my body, my soul. Some barrier I had been carrying for 47 years. Some knot of guilt and fear and shame. Suddenly released. I heard my Father's voice clear as day. Let go, David. Come home. And then, with the last breath in my lungs, I pushed out the final note. The sound that emerged wasn't from me. It was too big, too powerful. It was the sound of gates slamming shut, of seals being locked, of divine judgment being rendered. It echoed off the stones of the wall, rolled across Jerusalem, seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. And then, silence. Complete. Absolute. Perfect silence. I lowered the shofar from my lips. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From relief. From exhaustion. From something I can only describe as grace. I opened my eyes. The wall stood before me, unchanged. The crowd stood frozen, staring, tears streaming down many faces. But the darkness was gone. The shadows had vanished. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as if a weight had been lifted from the entire city. Rabbi Weiss was beside me, tears in his ancient eyes. "You did it!" He whispered. "David, you did it. The door is sealed." I tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, I felt my legs give out. Jonathan caught me before I hit the ground, lowering me gently to sit with my back against the wall. "Get a doctor!" someone shouted. But I shook my head. I knew what was happening. The cancer, the exhaustion, the sheer effort of what I had just done. My body was giving up, and I was ready. Jonathan knelt beside me, holding my hand. "Mr. Levi, stay with us, please." I smiled at him. "It's all right, son. It's done. Tell my children. Tell them I love them. Tell them their father did one good thing before he died." Rabbi Weiss leaned close, his hand on my forehead. "David Levi, you have saved countless souls today. The gates of paradise are open for you. Go in peace." I looked up at the sky above Jerusalem. The stars were beginning to appear, one by one, like lights being turned on in heaven's windows. And I swear, for just a moment, I saw them. My mother, my father, standing at the wall beside me, smiling. "We're so proud of you," my father said, though I heard it with my heart, not my ears. "You closed the door, David. You finished what I started. Now come. Come home." I felt myself being lifted, though my body stayed on the ground. I felt lighter than air, free of pain, free of fear. The wall before me began to glow, and I understood. This wasn't just a wall. It was a doorway, not to darkness but to light. I heard singing, thousands of voices in harmony. I heard the sound of the shofar, but pure now, perfect, the way it was always meant to sound. And I stepped through. Epilogue. What was left behind? Narrated by Jonathan Kadosh, 6 months later. David Levi died at the Western Wall on Yom Kippur, 2024, at exactly the moment the final shofar blast was sounded to close the holy day. The doctors said it was heart failure, brought on by the cancer and the stress of fasting. But those of us who were there, who saw what happened, we know the truth. He didn't die. He was taken. We buried him 3 days later in the Mount of Olives cemetery, overlooking the old city. His children came from Rome, Sophia and Marco, along with their families. They didn't know the full story then. How could they? How do you explain something like that? But I told them, eventually. I showed them my grandfather's journal. I explained what their father had done, the door he had opened, and the door he had closed. Sophia wept. Marco was angry at first. Angry that his father had carried such a burden alone. Angry that he had risked his life. But then Marco said something I'll never forget. My father was always afraid of the shofar. Every year at Rosh Hashanah, he would leave the room when it was blown. We thought he was just traumatized or superstitious. But now I understand. He wasn't afraid of the sound. He was afraid of what he could do with it. The shofar David used that day is kept in a special case now, in a secure room beneath the great synagogue in Jerusalem. Rabbis have examined it, tested it. There's nothing unusual about it physically, it's just a ram's horn. But no one can blow it. We've tried. The greatest shofar blowers in Israel have attempted it, and nothing comes out but silence. It's as if the instrument itself knows its purpose has been fulfilled. As for the door, the crack between worlds that David opened in 1977 and sealed in 2024, we monitor it carefully. There is a small group of us, descendants of the rabbis who witnessed what happened, who keep watch. We've developed ways to detect disturbances, to sense if the seals are weakening. So far, everything is quiet. The shadows haven't returned. The strange sounds have stopped. Whatever David did that day, it worked. But I think about him often. I think about the weight he carried for 47 years, the silence he kept, the fear he lived with, all so that one day, when the moment came, he could do what no one else could do. My grandfather was right. David Levi was chosen for this. Maybe from birth. Maybe even before. Some souls are brought into the world to carry impossible burdens, to stand in the gap between light and darkness, to give everything so that others might live in peace. David Levi was one of those souls. And every Yom Kippur when the shofar is blown at the western wall, I think of him. I imagine him on the other side, in the world to come, finally at rest, finally free. And I hope that somewhere in the halls of heaven, he can hear the shofar being blown the way it was always meant to be blown, in joy, in triumph, in the celebration of life, because that's what he gave us. He gave us life. He closed the door to death and opened the door to hope. And for that, we will remember his name forever. David ben Moshe Levi, the shofar blower who saved the world. May his memory be a blessing. Amen. The end.